Well, we're going to keep moving on here to another critical issue here in the United States, and that is the ongoing crackdown on students, both at the undergraduate and the graduate level, who have been standing up for the Palestinian people who are continuing to endure a genocide. And we are very, very honored to be joined here on the show by Grant Minor, who, of course, was expelled from Columbia and is also the president of UAW Local 2710. I even saw him out on the streets today. Grant, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me. And yes, coming right from a rally up at Columbia.
Right on. Well, it's great to have you here. Really appreciate you joining us in the midst of everything. I mean, it seems. Let me just ask you this, Grant. I mean, what do you think is really behind the Trump administration pulling? I mean, this is a massive crackdown that we're seeing day after day after day. Students being targeted. We're seeing universities like Columbia totally capitulate to the Trump administration. What are they so afraid of to be bringing such a heavy boom down on the solidarity movement with Palestine?
Yeah, I mean, it's an unprecedented usage of leverage. I can't really recall ever seeing, hundreds of millions of dollars being withheld, already congressionally granted money being held from large research universities for stuff like, LGBTQ health and climate science, all to sort of punish domestic dissent. Like, what do I think is behind it? I mean, I think that what really scares them is that the movement really isn't stopping. The students are still very energized. And I mean, we saw today, people are more energized now than ever. So I think that they're sort of realizing that if they're actually going to try to stamp out this movement, they're going to need to, play dirty. I mean, it's not going to work, but I think this is their thought process.
It's really frightening, Grant. I mean, I must have watched the video of the student at Tufts University who got arrested, I think 2 days ago now, just in broad daylight. Like I know you saw it too. I must have watched it like 12 times because I just couldn't believe how casual it is for these masked agents who are in plain clothes to just walk up to this girl and like handcuff her without charging her with anything and take her away to Louisiana, apparently. Some ICE detention facility, I believe the same one they initially took Mahmoud Khalil to. And I mean, you were at Columbia University. You're featured prominently in this film, The Encampments, which comes out today in theaters. Um, and obviously, like you've had to deal with being fired, being expelled, which is horrible, and then watching your I guess colleagues, fellow students, be arrested and sent into these like torture facilities. I don't know what else to call them. And I'm just curious your general thoughts on that, on the fact that we're in a situation where these students across the country at this point are having their visas revoked, and in some cases, their green cards don't seem to mean anything and are being put into prison for having an opinion that opposes genocide.
Yeah, I mean, it was tremendously distressing. I remember finding out about it. I mean, originally, I had received word that, there had been unrest. It wasn't clear whether somebody was let out or whatever. But as the sort of the facts became clear over like the next 5, 6 hours as to what had happened the last night, I mean, it's horrifying. I mean, there's not really any way to sum it up. I mean, seeing the videos of this latest, the Tufts graduate student get arrested. It's just like, I mean, I keep saying it feels like cheap words. It's like something out of a movie, but like these masked people just coming up and throwing somebody into a van and just like, using extrajudicial rendition to just a site away from their lawyers, away from people who love them. It's really, I think it's a dark turn. And 50% of UAW 2710's membership is international students. Our graduate school has a lot of people coming from all over. And this is something that, is really scary to a lot of our members. I mean, it feels like a personal attack on higher ed workers, but also immigrants everywhere.
Grant, you've spoken about this in different fora before, but of course the pretext for this, the umbrella they're throwing over this, is that this is an effort to stamp out anti-Semitism in America, and that this is really just to protect Jewish people, and especially on campus. You are someone coming, from the Jewish community. I mean, I wonder how that strikes you, and if in fact it has a pernicious effect in terms of how people are seeing the importance of standing up against all forms of bigotry.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly is an ironic place where we're in. I mean, it's always been very ironic that like, people who are or Jewish people who are anti-Zionists are sort of smeared as sort of self-hating Jews. But I think that these actions to deport people is making people feel much more emboldened. I mean, I hear, awful things about Arab students, about Middle Eastern students. I see them on Twitter. But the same language is now being used against Jewish students as well. I mean, like, people were calling me like a traitorous rat. They were speculating that I was pretending to be Jewish. And obviously this is sort of part and parcel of narratives of like who is a terrorist, that sort of using that appellation to punish people standing up for what's right in the United States. I mean, it's you're looking at 150-year history easily. But yeah, I mean, I think that it really we're in a bad place in terms of how specifically the right is emboldened to talk about people. But I think that like also, there is a hopeful note here, and that like people realize that this is wrong. I mean, today at Columbia, we had it wasn't just my union that was rallying, it was all the UAW locals.
Mm.
That was staff, that was postdoc workers at Columbia, that was contract faculty, so non-tenure faculty, that was student workers at other affiliated institutions. And then we went outside and you see like NYU faculty, New School graduate students. I mean, all over people are standing up and saying like this isn't okay. And I mean, I think that there's a reason why this moment is the reason that like all of our unions are sort of working together to put forward unified demands for the first time that I can remember. I mean, it's in one way it's like, as I said, it's horrifying, but in another way it's it gives me hope that like people aren't going to stand for this.
I want to speak to that, to specifically Columbia University, because obviously the documentary film that Breakthrough News and Watermelon Pictures produced with Macklemore, that again you were featured prominently in. I want to talk about this a bit because it goes back in time to last year when these encampments started, and Columbia University is where they started, where you were quite active. And the repression that students faced was so extreme, and this film does a really good job of highlighting what these encampments were about, and really pushing back against the dominant mainstream right-wing narrative that portrays people like you as just like vicious anti-Semites that have brought back 1930s Germany or something. And also demonstrates how this country, under the Biden administration, I should point out, sent the stormtroopers, sent police into these university campuses to essentially like beat up students and arrest them. And since you are featured prominently in this film, I'm just curious if you can talk a bit about, based on everything we've just discussed, why you think it's so important for people to, one, go watch this film, and two, what it means moving forward, because this isn't over. It's not like this is something that happened last year and now it's a closed book. It's people are being arrested, people are being expelled, people are being fired. And given what just happened at Columbia, where they basically capitulated to Trump's demands, there is basically, as we've seen a lot of people call it, a blueprint that they would like to use nationally for how to shut down academic freedom across universities.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that one of the most important reasons is that Mahmoud is still in jail. Um, you know, uh, it speaks to who Mahmoud is as a person, and to the movement that he represented. He was, I'm a union guy. He represented me at the bargaining table with the university. And I think it really is important to get people out to see this, because as you said, it totally blows away all of the media narrative around the encampments. I mean, one of my favorite moments in the film is like, you see just, students enjoying themselves. Like you see a mariachi band playing, you see, students having Havdalah, Jewish students having Havdalah. And it really just calls into question. Like I remember talking to relatives about it, and they, they're saying like, "Hey, like this seems crazy." It really paints the situation as crazy. Like, why are we snatching these people off the streets when what they were doing is, sitting on a lawn, singing songs, educating themselves about a really, really important, perhaps the most important, moral issue of our times, in which their university is deeply complicit. I mean, these are members of a community coming together as a community to discuss and protest what that community participates in. And I think that that's the reason why it's important to get people out, to sort of educate people about what the people in the halls of power are calling like a violent extremist movie or extremist movement. This is not a violent extremist movie. It's the opposite.
Well, as you mentioned too, Grant, I mean, there's a lot of outrage and a lot of people standing up, a lot of people who are very concerned over what is taking place. I mean, not just obviously with the crackdown on students, but now the, acceleration of the genocide in Gaza, the expansion into the West Bank of hostilities in every possible way. And I hear through the grapevine that on April 5th of this year, people are going to Washington, D.C., I think, to raise their voices about some of these things. I mean, I just wonder, how important do you think it is for people to be at protests and other events like this in this moment, given the stakes?
I think it's very important. I think it's we've done a couple of these. I'm excited to we say like get on the bus. I'm excited to go down to Barclays Center or wherever the Brooklyn bus is leaving from and get on with the same people. I've been doing it for the past over a year, and I think that local organizing is really important. And we're all committed to local organizing, but it's time that we gave Biden that energy. We need to give Trump that energy. We need to show him, especially now,
Yeah.
that this is completely insane, and we need to put a stop to it. It's time for a people's arms embargo. The American people aren't ready to have just random residents deported, all in the service of arming a foreign genocide apartheid state. So we need to show up in huge numbers.
Grant, I want to ask you about something. You gave a really amazing speech at this event that took place in New York City last Saturday. It was a Free Mahmoud, Free Palestine event. And I loved everything you said. I came up to you and told you how much I loved everything you said. And I want to reiterate that. It was an excellent speech. People should go check it out. Breakthrough News streamed that event. Um, but you said something that I kind of was hoping you could elaborate on a bit, because I don't know if a lot of people know this about you, but you are actually not only Jewish yourself, but you were studying. You were involved in Jewish studies. You were like getting a PhD in Jewish studies, like very, much involved in Judaism in so many ways, academically, actually. And so I only raise that to say, I mean, they're saying they're doing this all in the name of fighting anti-Semitism. And here you are, a Jewish kid who got expelled and fired for being against genocide. So I don't know, that seems pretty anti-Semitic to me. But you said something in your speech last week where you noted that, and I think it's so important for Jews to be speaking out against genocide because it is being done in the name of, the Jewish state or whatnot, and in the name of fighting anti-Semitism. But you noted that being Jewish doesn't somehow give you like extra insight, or doesn't mean you somehow like your voice matters more. And I mean, hearing that as an Arab was very interesting to me, because I think for so much of my life, I mean, I do appreciate Jews who speak out, but even I've always felt like, yeah, what this person actually is saying does matter more because they're saying it as a Jew. So I'm just curious if you could speak to that a little bit, because I just thought it was an interesting comment you made.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up. I'm getting a PhD in comp lit, but I do work on Jewish medieval texts. The irony besides, yeah, I think it is important that Jewish people stand up and identify themselves as such when they are in the movement for Palestine. But I also think that it's important to recognize that you don't have to be a Jewish person or an Arab to talk about this. For example, people at Columbia would say like, well, why do you care? Like, this seems like a boutique issue. Like, obviously, you guys are anti-Semitic, otherwise you wouldn't care about this. But I think that's actually not true. It's not just like a fight between Arabs and Jews. I mean, that framing is just completely ridiculous, historically speaking. But besides that, I mean, as I said, it's like everybody can see what's going on. This is what is pretty much the first televised genocide. Anybody watching what is going on in Gaza can easily see what the morally correct position is. It's not complicated. It's not nuanced. Just look with your eyes and you'll see, which is why I felt like I needed to include that. Not to sort of, say it's not important that Jewish people talk, but just to say like, and also I think it's also important that, I'm from Sacramento. My ancestors, as far as I can trace it to my knowledge, have never lived in Palestine. And so, it's like first stop Ukraine, before that, maybe Spain, maybe think, I don't know. But yeah, so I don't have any special claim to this knowledge besides, the responsibility that I feel that I bear for discussing my community's wider complicity or commitment to these ideas.
Well, critically important on many different levels. I just want to ask you here before we let you go, and we spoke to this a little bit, but the labor element of this, I feel, has been so important. And of course, when you were expelled from Columbia, it was basically right before there was the starting of bargaining going on. I was hoping you could just talk a little bit more about that in the context of what we've seen over the past, several years of this huge wave of unionization of grad students and others on universities, and how this repression is really, impacting and has impacted over the past year, the labor situation on campus.
Yeah, it was really disappointing to see Columbia totally, A, capitulate to Trump, but B, just show cowardice. There was no reason why they needed to cancel bargaining. I'm sure they realized there was going to be a rally, and were like, we don't want to deal with this. And so they unilaterally canceled our first session. We had hundreds of members who were really excited. We have open bargaining at Columbia, and we're excited to get the ball rolling on a contract. And I'll say, one of the first articles that we plan to bring to the table is our package dealing with international students. And so this is working towards codifying important protections for international students. So by kicking the can down the road on that, Columbia is sending a pretty strong statement about what they view as important. Like, they don't want to come to the table and discuss how we can protect our community, how we can make scholarship better, our lives better. They would rather just not meet, which I think, like I said, it speaks for itself. But as you said, we're higher ed has a lot of union density. And as featured today at our rally, we're going to hold their feet to the fire. We have a number of cross-union demands, not just SWC. So, work towards freeing Mahmoud Khalil, ensure that our research, which is being threatened by these cuts, is not cut. Activate that $15 billion endowment to try to make up for losses, and actually take a stand against Trump. They've just completely folded over. And they can sue the federal government. The American Association of University Professors is already making moves to sue the federal government against these deportations. So I would ask, like, why is it that the professors have to do it, but the actual, billion-dollar institutions don't feel moved to protect us? I mean, I tell this story a lot, and perhaps I overtell it, but I just think of our member Ranjani, who had their visa revoked, and rather than actually helping them, Columbia sent staff to their door to try to evict them from their Columbia apartment illegally, I might add, as well as like instantly, like just basically fired them from their job. It's just completely unacceptable, and it's high time that Columbia be face consequences for the way that it's throwing its community under the bus.
Well, Grant Minor, president of UAW Local 2710, thank you so much for giving us some of your time here on the Freedom Side.
Thanks so much.